It's a mess. Whatever. My hair's always a mess. Go fucking figure. Go fucking figure. Mm-mm. 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 Hello. Better? No guac today. Sorry. No guac today. I did, however, cut my knee. I don't know if y'all can see that. Cut my knee pretty bad. Don't ask me with what, because I don't know. And then my cat's fucking clawed me up this morning. She was falling off the bed and she tried to use me as leverage. So that's what happened. What would you do if when you okay? So he said yes, would go. Yes, I would. Guac in spirit. Thanks, Sarah. Y'all, everything is turning to shit in this book and in life in general, but mostly in this book. I'm just gonna read this sentence again. Okay. I just read the Sam part again. Just to feel something. We are starting on chapter 51 today and reading through 55, I think. I don't honestly remember. All I know is I'm reading 51 and until Sarah tells me to stop, because Sarah knows it all. 56! God damn! Y'all, that's... Okay, we can do that. Oh, okay, 53 up to... Oh, okay, it's not that bad. There's a bunch of short ones. Okay. Yeah, there's a bunch of short ones. Hi, Nico. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started because we got some ground to cover today, y'all. We have some ground to cover today. We're chapter 51, page 417, if you're following along on the book. And the only way to do it is just to do it, so let's do it. Manon and her 13 stood around a table in a room deep within the witches' barracks. You know why I called you here, Manon said. None of them replied. None of them sat. They'd barely spoken to her since butchering that tribe in the White Fangs, and then today, more news, more requests. The Duke asked me to pick another coven to use, a Blackbeak coven. Silence. I'd like your suggestions. They didn't meet her eyes, didn't utter a word. Manon snapped down her iron teeth. You would dare defy me? Sorrel cleared her throat, attention on the table. Never you, Manon, but we defy that human worm's right to use our bodies as if they were his own. Your High Witch has given orders that will be obeyed. You might as well name the 13, Astrid said, the only one of them holding Manon's gaze. Her nose was still swollen and bruised from the beating, for we would sooner that be our fate than hand over our sisters. And you all agree with this, that you wish to breed demon offspring until your bodies break apart. We are Blackbeaks, Astrid said, her chin high. We are no one's slaves and will not be used as such. If the price for that is never returning to the wastes, then so be it. None of the others so much as flinched. They'd all met. They'd discussed this beforehand, what to say to her. As if she were in need of managing. Was there anything else you all decided in your little council meeting? There are things, Manon, Sorrel said. Things you need to hear. Betrayal. This was what mortals called betrayal. I don't give a shit about what you fools dare to believe I need to hear. The only thing I need to hear is the sound of you saying, "Yes, Wing Leader," and the name of a God's damned coven. Pick one yourself, Astrid snapped. The witches shifted. Not a part of the plan, was it? Manon stalked around the table to Astrid, past the other witches who didn't dare turn to face her. You have been nothing but a waste from the minute you set foot in this keep. I don't care if you have flown at my side for a century. I'm going to put you down like the yapping dog you are. Do it, Astrid hissed. The girls are fighting! The girls are fighting! Rip my throat out. Your grandmother will be so proud that you finally did. Sorel was at Manon's back. Is that a challenge? Manon said too quietly. Astrid's gold-flecked black eyes danced. But the door opened and shut. A young man with golden hair now stood in the room, his black stone collar gleaming in the torchlight. He shouldn't have gotten in. There had been witches everywhere, and she'd set sentinels from another coven to guard the halls so that none of the Duke's men could catch them unawares. As one, the 13 turned toward the handsome young man, and as one they flinched as he smiled, and a wave of darkness crashed into them. The fuck? Darkness without end. Darkness even Manon's eyes couldn't penetrate, and Manon was again standing before the Crochin witch, a dagger in her hand. We pity you for what you do to your children. You force them to kill and hurt and hate until there is nothing left inside of them, of you. That is why you are here, the Crochin wept. Because of the threat you posed to the monster you called grandmother when you chose mercy and you saved your rival's life. Manon violently shook her head, blinking. Then it was gone. There was only darkness, and the 13, shouting to one another, struggling, and a golden-haired young man had been in that room with the yellow legs, Elite had said. Manon started prowling through the darkness, navigating the room by memory and smell. Some of her 13 were nearby. Some had backed against the walls, and the otherworldly reek of the man, of the demon inside of him. The smell wrapped around her fully, and Manon drew Windcleaver. Then there he was, chuckling as someone, Ghislaine, started screaming. Manon had never heard that sound. She'd never heard any of their scream with fear and pain. Manon hurtled into a blind sprint and tackled him to the ground. No sword. She didn't want a sword for his execution. Light cracked around her, and there was his handsome face and that collar. Wing Leader, he grinned, in a voice that was not from this world. Manon's hands were around his throat, squeezing, her nails ripping through his skin. Were you sent here? She demanded. Her eyes met his, and the ancient malice in them shrank back. Get away, he hissed. Manon did no such thing. Were you sent here? She roared. The young man surged up, but then Astrid was there, pinning his legs. Make him bleed, she said from behind Manon. The creature continued thrashing, and in the darkness some of the 13 were still shouting in agony and terror. Who sent you? Manon bellowed. His eyes shifted, turning green, turning clear. It was with a young man's voice that he said, Kill me. Please, please kill me. Roland. My name was Roland. The blackness spread across his eyes again, along with pure panic at whatever... Hold on. That Roland? That Dorian's cousin, Roland? Oh my god. Oh my god. Damn. Damn. Then blackness spread across his eyes again, along with pure panic at whatever he beheld in Manon's face, and in Astrid's over her shoulder. The demon inside the man shrieked, Get away! She'd heard and seen enough. Manon squeezed harder, her iron nails shredding through mortal flesh and muscle. Black, reeking blood coated her hand, and she ripped harder into him, until she got to the bone and slashed through it, and his head thumped against the floor. Manon could have sworn he sighed. The darkness vanished, and Manon was instantly on her feet, gore dripping from her hands as she surveyed the damage. Ghislaine sobbed in the corner. All the color leached from her rich, dark skin. Thea and Kay were both tear-stained and silent, the two lovers gaping at each other, and Etta and Briar, both of her shadows, both born and raised in darkness. They were on their hands and knees, puking, right alongside the green-eyed demon twins, Feline and Fallon. The rest of the 13 were unharmed, still flush with color, some panting from the momentary surge of rage and energy, but fine. Had only some of them been targeted? Manon looked at Asterin, at Sorel, and Vesta, and Lynn, and Imogen, then at the ones that had been drained. They all met her gaze this time. "Get away," the demon had screamed, as if in surprise and terror, after looking her in the eyes. Those who had been affected, their eyes were ordinary colors, brown and blue and green, but the ones who hadn't, black eyes, flecked with gold. And when he'd looked at Manon's eyes, gold eyes had always been prized among black beaks. She never wondered why. But now wasn't the time, not with this reeking blood soaking into her skin. "This was a reminder," Manon said, her voice bouncing hollowly off the stones. She turned from the room. "Leave them to each other. Get rid of that body." Damn. Manon waited until Kaltain was alone, drifting up one of the forgotten spiraling staircases of Morath, before she pounced. The woman didn't flinch as Manon pinned her against the wall, her iron nails digging into Kaltain's pale, bare shoulders. "Where does the shadow fire come from?" Dark, empty eyes met hers. "From me." "Why you? What magic is it? Valg power?" Manon studied the collar around the woman's thin throat. Kaltain gave a small, dead smile. "It was mine, to start. Then it was melded with another source, and now it is the power of every world, every life." "Nonsense." Manon pushed her harder into the dark stone. "How do you take that collar off?" "It does not come off." Manon bared her teeth. "And what do you want with us? To put collars on us?" "They want kings," Kaltain breathed, her eyes flickering with some strange, sick delight. "Mighty kings, not you." More drivel. Manon growled, but there was a delicate hand on her wrist, and it burned. Oh God, it burned, and her bones were melting. Her iron nails had become molten ore. Her blood was boiling. Manon leapt back from Kaltain, and only gripping her wrist told her that the injuries weren't real. "I'm going to kill you," Manon hissed, but Shadowfire danced on Kaltain's fingertips even as the woman's face went blank again. Without a word, as if she had done nothing, Kaltain walked up the stairs and vanished. Alone in the stairwell, Manon cradled her arm, the echo of pain still reverberating through her bones. Slaughtering that tribe with Windcleaver, she told herself, had been a mercy. Damn. Chapter 52. As they left the Sin Eater's temple, Kale marveled at how strange it was to be working with Aelin and her court. How strange it was to not be fighting her for once. He shouldn't have even gone with them, given how much there was to do. Half the rebels had left Rifthold, more fleeing every day, and those who remained were pushing to relocate to another city. He'd kept them in line as much as he could, relying on Nesrin to back him up whenever they started to bring up his own past with the king. There were still people going missing, being executed, still people whom they rescued as often as they could from the butchering blocks. He would keep doing it until he was the last rebel left in this city. He would stay to help them, to protect them. But if what they'd learned about Erwin was true, gods help them all. Back on the city street, he turned in time to see Rowan offering a helping hand to pull Aelin out of the sewers. She seemed to hesitate, but then gripped it, her hand swallowed by his. A team, solid and unbreaking. The Fey Prince hoisted her up and set her on her feet. Neither of them immediately let go of the other. Kale waited for that twist and tug of jealousy, for the bile of it to sting him. But there was nothing, only a flickering relief, perhaps, that that Aelin had Rowan. He must be feeling truly sorry for himself, he decided. Footsteps sounded, and they all went still, weapons drawn, just as... "I've been looking for you for an hour," Nesrin said, hurrying out of the alley shadows. "What's..." She noticed their grim faces. They'd left the hellfire down there, hidden in a sarcophagus for safekeeping, and to keep themselves from being melted should things go very wrong. He was surprised Aelin had let him know that much, though how she planned to get into the castle she hadn't told him. "Just tell Rest and Brullo and the others to stay the hell away from the clock tower," was her only warning so far. He'd almost demanded to know what her plans were for the other innocents in the castle, but it had been nice. To have one afternoon with no fighting, with no one hating him, to feel like he was part of their unit. "I'll fill you in later," Cale said to her, but Nesrin's face was pale. "What is it?" Aelin, Rowan, and Adian stalked up to them with that unnatural, immortal silence. Nesrin squared her shoulders. "I've received word from Ren. He got into some minor trouble on the border, but he's fine. He has a message for you. For us." She brushed back a strand of her inky hair. Her hand trembled slightly. Cale braced himself, fought against the urge to put a hand on her arm. "The king," Nesrin went on, "has been building an army down in Morath, under Duke Parrington's supervision. The Valguards around Rifthold are the first of them. More are coming up this way." Valg foot soldiers, then. Morath, it seemed, might very well be their first or last battleground. Adian cocked his head, the wolf incarnate. "How many?" "Too many," Nesrin said. "We haven't gotten a full count. Some are camped inside mountains surrounding the war camp, never out all at once, never in full sight, but it's an army greater than any he's assembled before." Cale's palms became slick with sweat. "And more than that," Nesrin said, her voice hoarse. "The king now has an aerial cavalry of Iron-Teeth witches, a host 3,000 strong, who have been secretly training in the Farian Gap to ride wyverns that the king has somehow managed to create and breed." Gods above. Aelin lifted her head, gazing up at the brick wall as if she could see the aerial army there, the movement revealing the ring of scars around her neck. Dorian. They needed Dorian on the throne, needed this shut down. "You're certain of this?" Adian said. Rowan was staring at Nesrin, his face the portrait of a cold, calculating warrior, and yet he'd somehow moved closer to Aelin. Nesrin said tightly, "We lost many spies to attain that information." Cale wondered which of them had been her friends. Aelin spoke, her voice flat and hard. "Just to make sure I have it right. We are now facing 3,000 bloodthirsty Iron-Teeth witches on wyverns, and a host of deadly soldiers gathering in the south of Ardalan, likely to cut off any alliance between Terrasen and the southern kingdoms. Leaving Terrasen stranded. Say it," Cale silently beseeched her. "Say that you need Dorian, free and alive." Adian mused. "Melisande might be capable of uniting with us." He pinned Cale with an assessing stare, a general stare. "Do you think your father knows about the wyverns and witches? Anil is the closest city to the Farian Gap." His blood chilled. Was that why his father had been so keen to get him home? He sensed Adian's next question before the general spoke. "He doesn't wear a black ring," Cale said, "but I doubt you'd find him a pleasant ally, if he bothered to ally with you at all." "Things to consider," Rowan said, "should we need an ally to punch through the southern lines." Because they were actually talking about this. War. War was coming, and they might not all survive it. I don't need the reminder. I did not need the reminder. "So what are they waiting for?" Adian said, pacing. "Why not attack now?" Aelin's voice was soft, cold. "Me. They're waiting for me to make my move." None of them contradicted her. Cale's voice was strained as he shoved aside his swarming thoughts. "Anything else?" Nesrin reached into her tunic and pulled out a letter. She handed it to Adian. "From your second-in-command. They all worry for you. There's a tavern down the block. Give me 5 minutes and I'll have a reply for you," Adian said, already striding away. Nesrin followed him, giving Cale a silent nod. The general said over his shoulder to Rowan and Aelin, his heavy hood concealing any telltale features, "I'll see you at home." Meeting over. But Aelin suddenly said, "Thank you." Nesrin paused, somehow knowing the queen had spoken to her. Aelin put a hand on her heart. "For all that you're risking, thank you." Nesrin's eyes flickered as she said, "Long live the Queen." But Aelin had already turned away. Nesrin met Kael's gaze, and he followed after her and Dadian. An indestructible army, possibly led by Erwin, if the King of Ardalan was insane enough to raise him. An army that could crash any human resistance, but maybe not if they allied with magic wielders. That is, if the magic wielders, after all that had been done to them, even wanted to bother saving their world. "Talk to me," Rowan said from behind her, as Aelin stormed down street after street. She couldn't form the thoughts, let alone the words. How many spies and rebels had lost their lives to get that information? And how much worse would it feel when she sent people to their deaths, when she had to watch her soldiers butchered by those monsters? If Elena had thrown her a bone tonight, somehow leading that opium monger to the Sin Eater's temple so that they might find it, she wasn't feeling particularly grateful. "Aelin," Rowan said, quietly enough for only her and the alley rats to hear. She'd barely survived Baba Yellowlegs. How would anyone survive an army of witches trained in combat? He gripped her elbow, forcing her to stop. "We'll face this together," he breathed, his eyes shining bright and canines gleaming. "As we have in the past, to whatever end." She trembled like a goddamned coward, and yanked free, stalking away. She didn't even know where she was going, only that she had to walk, had to find a way to sort herself out, sort the world out, before she stopped moving, or else she would never move again. Wyverns, witches, a new, even bigger army. The alley pressed in on her, sealing as tightly as one of those flooded sewer tunnels. "Talk to me," Rowan said again, keeping a respectful distance behind. She knew these streets. A few blocks down she would find one of the Valg sewer entrances. Maybe she'd jump right in and hack a few of them to pieces. See what they knew about the Dark King Erwin, and whether he was still slumbering under that mountain. Maybe she wouldn't bother with questions at all. There was a strong, broad hand at her elbow, yanking her back against a hard male body, but the scent wasn't Rowan's. And the knife at her throat, the blade pressing so hard that her skin stung and split. "Going somewhere, Princess?" Lorcan breathed into her ear. Well, Rowan had thought he knew fear. He had thought he could face any danger with a clear head and ice in his veins, until Lorcan appeared from the shadows so fast that Rowan hadn't even scented him and put that knife against Aelin's throat. "You move," Lorcan snarled in Aelin's ear, "and you die. You speak, and you die. Understand?" Aelin said nothing. If she nodded, she'd slice her throat open on the blade. Blood was shining there already, just above her collarbone, filling the alley with its scent. The smell of it alone sent Rowan sliding into a frozen, murderous calm. "Understand?" "I thought he just said if she spoke, she dies." Lorcan hissed, jostling her enough that her blood flowed a bit faster. Still, she said nothing, obeying his order. Lorcan chuckled. "Good. I thought so." Oh. The world slowed and spread around Rowan with sharp clarity, revealing every stone of the buildings in the street, and the refuse and rubbish around them. Anything to give him an advantage, to use as a weapon. Where did she go? The fuck? If he'd had his magic, he would have choked the air from Lorcan's lungs by now, would have shattered through Lorcan's own dark shields with half a thought. If he'd had his magic, he would have had a shield of their own around them from the start, so this ambush could never happen. Aelin's eyes met his, and fear. There was genuine fear shining there. She knew she was in a compromised position. They both knew that no matter how fast she was, Lorcan's slice would be faster. Lorcan smiled at Rowan, his dark hood off for once, no doubt so that Rowan could see every bit of triumph in Lorcan's black eyes. "No words, Prince?" "Why?" was all Rowan could ask. Every action, every possible plan still left him too far away. He wondered whether Lorcan realized that if he killed her, Lorcan himself would be next, then Maeve, and maybe the world, for spite. Lorcan craned his head to look at Aelin's face. Her eyes narrowed to slits. "Where's the word key?" Aelin tensed, and Rowan willed her not to speak, not to taunt Lorcan. "We don't have it," Rowan said. Rage, unending, cataclysmic rage pounded through him. Exactly what Lorcan wanted. Exactly how Rowan had witnessed the Demi-Fae warrior manipulate their enemies for centuries. So Rowan locked that rage down. Tried to, at least. I could snap this neck of yours so easily, Lorcan said, grazing his nose against the side of her throat. Aelin went rigid. The possessiveness in that touch alone half-blinded him with feral wrath. It was an effort to stifle it again as Lorcan murmured into her skin. You're so much better when you don't open that hideous mouth. We don't have the key, Rowan said again. He'd slaughter Lorcan in the only way immortals learned and liked to kill. Slowly, viciously, creatively. Lorcan's suffering would be thorough. What if I told you we were working for the same side? Lorcan said. I'd tell you that Maeve works for only one side, her own. Maeve didn't send me here. Rowan could almost hear the words Aelin was struggling to keep in. Liar. Piece of shit liar. Then who did? Rowan demanded. I left. If we're on the same side, then put your rutting knife down, Rowan growled. Lorcan chuckled. I don't want to hear the princess yapping. What I have to say applies to both of you. Rowan waited, taking every second to assess and reassess their surroundings, the odds. At last, Lorcan loosened the blade slightly. Blood slid down Aelin's neck, onto her suit. You made the mistake of your short, pathetic mortal life when you gave Maeve that ring. Through the lethal calm, Rowan felt the blood drain from his face. You should have known better, Lorcan said, still gripping Aelin around the waist. You should have known she wasn't some sentimental fool, pinning after her lost love. She had plenty of things from Enthril. Why would she want his ring? His ring, and not Goldrin. Stop dancing around it and tell us what it is. But I'm having so much fun. Rowan leashed his temper so hard that he choked on it. The ring, Lorcan said, wasn't some family heirloom from Athril, sorry. She killed Athril. She wanted the keys and the ring, and he refused, and she killed him. While they fought, Brannon stole them away, hiding the ring with Goldrin and bringing the keys here. Didn't you ever wonder why the ring was in that scabbard? A demon hunting sword, and a ring to match. If Maeve wants to kill demons, Rowan said, we won't complain. The ring doesn't kill them. It grants immunity from their power. A ring forged by Mala herself. The Vel could not harm Athril when he wore it. Damn. Damn. Aelin's eyes widened even more, the scent of her fear shifting to something far deeper than dread of bodily harm. The bearer of the ring, Lorcan went on, smiling at the terror coating her smell, need never fear being enslaved by Wordstone. You handed her your own immunity. Damn. That doesn't explain why you left. Lorcan's face tightened. She slaughtered her lover for the ring, for the keys. She will do far worse to attain them now that they are on the playing board again. And once she has them, my queen will make herself a god. So, the knife remained too close to Aelin's neck to risk attacking. It will destroy her. Rowan's rage stumbled. You plan to get the keys, to keep them from her. I plan to destroy the keys. You give me your word key, Lorcan said, opening the fist he'd held against Aelin's abdomen, and I'll give you the ring. Sure enough, in his hand shone a familiar gold ring. You shouldn't be alive, Rowan said. If you had stolen the ring and fled, she would have killed you already. It was a trap. A pretty clever trap. I moved quickly. Lorcan had been hauling ass out of Wendelin. It didn't prove anything, though. The others, none of them know. You think I trust them not to say anything? The blood oath makes betrayal impossible. I'm doing this for her sake, Lorcan said. I'm doing this because I do not wish to see my queen become a demon herself. I'm obeying the oath in that regard. Aelin was bristling now, and Lorcan closed his fingers around the ring again. You're a fool, Rowan. You think only of the next few years, decades. What I am doing is for the sake of the centuries, for eternity. Maeve will send the others, to hunt you, to kill you both. Let tonight be a reminder of your vulnerability. You will never know peace for a single moment, not one. And even if we don't kill Aelin of the wildfire, time will. Damn. Rowan shut out the words. Lorcan peered at Aelin, his black hair shifting with the movement. Think it over, princess. What is immunity worth in a world where your enemies are waiting to shackle you? where one slip could mean becoming their eternal slave. Aelin just bared her teeth. Lorcan shoved her away, and Rowan was already moving, lunging for her. She whirled, the built-in blades in her suit flashing free. But Lorcan was gone. Damn. Damn. After deciding that the slices on her neck were shallow and that she was in no danger of dying from them, Rowan didn't talk to her for the rest of the journey home. If Lorcan was right... No, he wasn't right. He was a liar, and his bargain reeked of Maeve's tricks. Aelin pressed a handkerchief to her neck as they walked, and by the time they reached the apartment, the wounds had clotted. Aedion, mercifully, was already in bed. Rowan strode right into their bedroom. She followed him in, but he reached the bathroom and quietly shut the door behind him. Running water gurgled a heartbeat later. A bath. He'd done a good job concealing it, and his rage had been... She'd never seen someone that wrathful, but she'd still seen the terror on his face. It had been enough to make her master her own fear as fire started crackling in her veins, and she tried, God damn it, she'd tried, to find a way out of that hold, but Lorcan... Rowan had been right. Without her magic, she was no match for him. He could have killed her. All she had been able to think about, in spite of her kingdom, in spite of all she still had to do, was the fear in Rowan's eyes. And that it would be a shame if he never knew, if she never told him. Aelin cleaned her neck in the kitchen, washed the little bit of blood from her suit and hung it in the living room to dry, then pulled on one of Rowan's shirts and climbed into bed. She barely heard any splashing. Maybe he was just lying in the tub, staring at nothing with that hollow expression he'd worn since Lorcan had removed the knife from her throat. Minutes passed, and she shouted goodnight to Aedion, whose echoing goodnight rumbled through the walls. Then the bathroom door opened. A veil of steam rippled out, and Rowan appeared, a towel slung low across his hips. She took in the muscled abdomen, the powerful shoulders, but the emptiness in those eyes. She patted the bed. "Come here." He stood there, his eyes lingering on her scabbed neck. "We both are experts at clamping up, so let's make an agreement to talk right now, like even-tempered, reasonable people." He didn't meet her gaze as he padded toward the bed and slumped down beside her, stretching out over the blankets. She didn't even reprimand him for getting the sheets wet, or mention that he could have taken half a minute to put on some clothes. "Looks like our days of fun are over," she said, propping her head with a fist and staring down at him. He gazed blankly at the ceiling. "Witches, Dark Lords, Fae Queens. If we make it through this alive, I'm going to take a nice, long vacation." His eyes were cold. "Don't shut me out," she breathed. "Never," he murmured. "It's not..." He rubbed his eyes with his thumb and forefinger. "I failed you tonight." His words were a whisper in the darkness. "Rowan, he got close enough to kill you. If it had been any other enemy, they might have." The bed rumbled as he took a shuddering sigh and lowered his hands from his eyes. The raw emotion there made her bite her lip. Never did he let her see those things. "I failed you. I swore to protect you, and I failed tonight. Rowan, it's fine." "It's not fine." His hand was warm as it clamped on her shoulder. She let him turn her onto her back and found him half on top of her as he peered into her face. His body was a massive, solid force of nature above hers, but his eyes, the panic lingered. "I broke your trust." "You did no such thing, Rowan. You told him you wouldn't hand over the key." He sucked in a breath, his broad chest expanding. "I would have. God, Aelin, he had me, and he didn't even know it. He could have waited another minute, and I would have told him. Ring or no ring. Erwin, witches, and the king, Maeve, I would face all of them. But losing you..." He bowed his head, his breath warming her mouth as he closed his eyes. "I failed you tonight," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "I'm sorry." "Oh..." Damn. His pine and snow scent wrapped around her. She should move away, roll out of his reach. "Don't touch me like that." Yet there he was, his hand a band on her bare shoulder, his body nearly covering hers. You've nothing to be sorry for, she whispered. I trust you, Rowan. He gave her a barely perceptible nod. I missed you, he said quietly, his gaze darting between her mouth and eyes. When I was in Wendelin. I lied when I said I didn't. From the moment you left, I missed you so much I went out of my mind. I was glad for the excuse to track Lorcan here, just to see you again. And tonight, when he had that knife at your throat, the warmth of his calloused finger bloomed through her as he traced a path over the cut on her neck. I kept thinking about how you might never know that I missed you, with only an ocean between us. But if it was death separating us, I would find you. Shut. Ooh. 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 Okay. Ooh. 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 Ooh, the I find you trope. Woo! I would find you. Ooh. I am a sucker for that. Woo. I am a sucker for that. Damn. Damn. Oh my god. I don't care how many rules it would break. Even if I had to get all 3 keys myself and open a gate, I would find you again. Always. She blinked back the burning in her eyes as he reached between their bodies and took her hand, guiding it up to lay against his tattooed cheek. It was an effort to remember how to breathe, to focus on anything but that smooth, warm skin. He didn't tear his eyes away from hers as she grazed her thumb along his sharp cheekbone. Savoring each stroke, she caressed his face, that tattoo, never breaking his stare, even as it stripped her naked. I'm sorry, he still seemed to say. She kept her stare locked on his as she let go of his face and slowly, making sure he understood every step of the way, tilted her head back until her throat was arched and bare before him. Are we about to get hot in here? Is it about to get hot in here? Hold on. Hold on. Is it about to get hot in here? Aelin, he breathed, not in reprimand or warning, but a plea. It sounded like a plea. He lowered his head to her exposed neck and hovered a hair's breadth away. She arched her neck farther, a silent invitation. What's happening? What is this? What are we doing? Rowan let out a soft groan and grazed his teeth against her skin. One bite. What? Not us biting again. One movement was all it would take for him to rip out her throat. His elongated canine slid along her flesh, gently, precisely. She clenched the sheets to keep from running her fingers down his bare back and drawing him closer. He braced one hand beside her head, his fingers twining in her hair. No one else, she whispered. I would never allow anyone else at my throat. Showing him was the only way he'd understand that trust, in a manner that only the predatory, fey side of him would comprehend. No one else, she said again. He let out another low groan, answer and confirmation and request, and the rumble echoed inside her. Carefully, he closed his teeth over the spot where her lifeblood thrummed and pounded, his breath hot on her skin. Oh my god. Oh my god. Yo, I don't know if I can keep reading this. Hold on. TikTok is gonna ban me again. Hold the fuck on. What are we doing? She shut her eyes, every sense narrowing on that sensation, on the teeth and mouth at her throat, on the powerful body trembling with restraint above hers. His tongue flicked against her. Yeah, I definitely can't read this out loud, y'all. TikTok is gonna kick me the fuck out of here. Oh. Her breathing turned ragged as he dragged his stare to hers. Hungry, feral, unyielding. Not yet. I've heard that shit before. I've heard that shit before. He said roughly, his own breathing uneven. Not now. Why? It was an effort to remember speech with him looking at her like that, like he might eat her alive. Heat pounded through her. Oh, can't say that. I want to take my time with you. Oh, my love. Oh, no. Oh, no. Don't say that. Y'all. Y'all. Why would he say that? Why would she make him say that? See, this just turned the whole... This ruined it. This ruined it. This ruined everything. I'm about to start crying. No, I'm about to start crying. What do you mean? We have all the fucking time in the world, head ass. Bitch ass. Shut up. To learn every inch of you. And this apartment has very, very thin walls. I don't want to have an audience, he added as he leaned down again, brushing his mouth over the cut at the base of her throat. Alright. Oh, by the word, she was in trouble. So much rutting trouble. And when he said her name like that... This changes things, she said, hardly able to get the words out. Things have been changing for a while already. We'll deal with it. She wondered how long his resolve to wait would last if she lifted her face to claim his mouth with her own, if she ran her fingers down the groove of his spine, if she touched him lower than that, but... Wyverns. Witches, army, Erwin. She loosed a heavy breath. Sleep, she mumbled. We should sleep. He swallowed again, slowly peeling himself away from her and strode to the closet to dress. Honestly, it was an effort not to leap after him and rip that damn towel away. Maybe she should make 80 and go stay somewhere else, just for a night. And then she would burn in hell for all eternity for being the most selfish, awful person to ever grace the earth. She forced herself to put her back to the closet, not trusting herself so much as look at Rowan without doing something infinitely stupid. She was in so much goddamn trouble. IWABTA? What? What is that? I don't know what that means. Oh, I don't know it yet. Okay. I thought that was something from the Assassin's Blade. That's all I could think about. My Sam. My Sam. Chapter 53. Let me start reading before I start crying. Drink, the demon prince coaxed in a lover's croon. Savor it. The prisoner was sobbing on the floor of the dungeon cell, his fear and pain and memories leaking from him. The demon prince inhaled them as though they were opium. Delicious. It was. He hated himself, cursed himself, but the despair coming from the man as his worst memories ripped him to shreds. It was intoxicating. It was strength. It was life. He had nothing and no one anyway. If he got the chance, he would find a way to end it. For now, this was eternity. This was birth and death and rebirth. So he drank the man's pain, his fear, his sorrow, and he learned to like it. No. I need them to get in there and get him the fuck out because I'm losing my man. I'm losing him. I'm losing my husband. Chapter 54. Manon stared at the letter that the trembling messenger had just delivered. Alide was trying her best to look as though she wasn't observing every flick of Manon's eyes across the page, but it was hard not to stare when the witch snarled with every word she read. Alide lay on her pallet of hay, the fire already dying down the embers, and groaned as she sat up, her sore body aching. She'd found a water skin in the larder, and had even asked to cook if she could take it for the wing leader. The cook, sorry. He didn't dare object, or begrudge her the 2 little bags of nuts she had also nabbed for the wing leader. Better than nothing. She'd stored it all under the pallet, and Manon hadn't noticed. Any day now, the wagon would be arriving with supplies. When it left, Alide would be on it, and never have to deal with any of this darkness again. Alide reached for the pile of logs and added 2 to the fire, sending sparks shooting up in a wave. She was about to lie down again when Manon said from the desk, "In 3 days, I'll be heading out with my 13. To where? Alide dared ask. From the violence with which the wing leader had read the letter, it couldn't be anywhere pleasant. To a forest in the north. Manon caught herself and moved across the floor, her steps light but powerful as she came to the hearth and chucked the letter in. "I'll be gone for at least 2 days. If I were you, I'd suggest using that time to lie low." Alide's stomach twisted at the thought of what exactly it might mean for the wing leader's protection to be thousands of miles away. But there was no point in telling Manon that. She wouldn't care, even if she'd claimed Alide as one of her kind. It meant nothing, anyway. She wasn't a witch. She'd be escaping soon. She doubted anyone here would really think twice about her disappearance. "I'll lie low," Alide said, perhaps in the back of a wagon, as it made its way out of Morath into freedom beyond. Damn. It took 3 whole days to prepare for the meeting. The matron's letter had contained no mention of the breeding and slaughter of witches. In fact, it was as if her grandmother hadn't received any of Manon's messages. As soon as Manon got back to this little mission, she'd start questioning the keep's messengers. Slowly, painfully. The 13 were to fly to coordinates in Ardalan, smack in the middle of the kingdom, just inside the tangle of oak-walled forest, and arrive a day before the arranged meeting to establish a safe perimeter. For the king of Ardalan was to at last see the weapon her grandmother had been building, and apparently wanted to inspect Manon as well. We're getting Manon and Aelin in the same perimeter? He was bringing his son. We're getting Dorian and Manon in the same perimeter? Are Dorian and Manon gonna end up together? I'm running the numbers in my head, trying to see if it would make sense. Well, now that Dorian is technically kind of ruthless, maybe. But I can't see Manon with a man. I see her with a woman. I can't see her with a man. I'm sorry. She literally screams lesbian to me. But I guess. Me. I see Manon with me. Me too. Sister wives. Anyway. He was bringing his son, though Manon doubted it was for guarding his back in the way that the heirs protected their matrons. She didn't particularly care about any of it. A stupid, useless meeting. She'd almost wanted to tell her grandmother. A waste of time. At least seeing the king would provide an opportunity to meet the man who was sending out these orders to destroy witches and make monstrosities of their witchlings. At least she would be able to tell her grandmother in person about it. Maybe even witness the matron make mincemeat of the king once she learned the truth about what he'd done. Oh my god, sorry. Manon climbed into the saddle, and Abraxas walked out onto the post, adjusting to the latest armor the aerial blacksmith had crafted. Finally light enough for the wyverns to manage, and now to be tested on this trip. Wind bit at her, but she ignored it, just as she'd ignored her 13. Astrid wouldn't speak to her, and none of them had spoken about the vowed prince that the Duke had sent to them. It had been a test, to see who would survive, and to remind her what was at stake. Just as unleashing Shadowfire on that tribe had been a test. She still couldn't pick a coven, and she wouldn't until she'd spoken to her grandmother. But she doubted that the Duke would wait much longer. Manon gazed into the plunge, at the ever-growing army sweeping across the mountains and valleys like a carpet of darkness and fire. So many more soldiers hidden beneath it. Her shadows had reported that very morning about spotting lean, winged creatures with twisted human forms soaring through the night skies, too swift and agile to track before they vanished into the heavy clouds and did not return. The majority of Morath's horrors, Manon suspected, had yet to be revealed. She wondered if she'd command them too. She felt the eyes of her 13 on her, waiting for the signal. Manon dug her heels into Abraxas' side, and they free fell into the air. The scar on her arm ached. It always ached, more than the collar, more than the cold, more than the Duke's hands on her, more than anything that had been done to her. Only the Shadowfire was a comfort. She had once believed that she'd been born to be queen, and she had since learned that she'd been born to be a wolf. The Duke had even put a collar on her like a dog, and had shoved a demon prince inside her. She'd let it win for a time, curling up so tightly inside herself that the prince forgot she was there, and she waited. In that cocoon of darkness, she bided her time. Oop. She got Kaltain? Okay. Huh? The scar on her arm ached. It had always ached, more than the collar, more than the cold, more than the Duke's hands on her, more than anything that had been done to her. Only the Shadowfire was a comfort. She had once believed that she'd been born to be a queen. She had since learned she'd been born to be a wolf. The Duke had even put a collar on her like a dog, and had shoved a demon prince inside her. She'd let it win for a time, curling up so tightly inside herself that the prince forgot she was there. Wait. What? Did I miss something? Hold on. She had a collar on her? Did I not read that? Why do I not remember that? And she waited. In that cocoon of darkness, she bided her time, letting him think her gone, letting them do what they wanted to the mortal shell around her. It was in that cocoon where the Shadowfire began to flicker, fueling her, feeding her. When Manon grabbed her by the neck. What? Okay, well, I guess I just forgot. I don't remember reading that. Damn. Was I even paying attention? Anyway, sorry y'all. I guess I wasn't fucking paying attention when I was reading. It was in that cocoon where the shadow fire began to flicker, fueling her, feeding her. Long ago, when she was small and clean, flames of gold had cracked at her fingers, secret and hidden. Then they had vanished, as all good things had vanished, and now they had returned, reborn within that dark shell as phantom fire. The prince inside her did not notice when she began to nibble at him. Bit by bit, she stole morsels of the otherworldly creature that had taken her body for its skin, who did such despicable things with it. The creature noticed the day she took a bigger bite, big enough that it screamed in agony. Before it could tell anyone, she leapt upon it, tearing and ripping with her shadow fire until only ashes of... Wait. Okay, sorry. With her shadow fire until only ashes of malice remained until... Oh my god! This whole time, I thought that we were reading from Manon's point of view. This is Kaltain! Oh, that's why I was so confused. I missed the little time skip at the bottom of the fucking page. I thought we were talking about Manon having a collar on her neck. Okay, I'm no longer confused. No longer confused. Sorry, y'all. Okay, yeah, before she could tell anyone, she leapt upon it, tearing and ripping with her shadow fire, until only ashes of malice remained, until it was no more than a whisper of thought. Fire. It did not like fire of any kind. For weeks now, she had been here, waiting again, learning about the flame in her veins, how it bled into the thing in her arm and re-emerged as shadow fire. The thing spoke to her sometimes, in languages she had never heard, that had maybe never existed. The collar remained around her neck, and she let them order her around, let them touch her, hurt her. Soon enough she would find them true purpose, and then she would howl her wrath at the moon. She'd forgotten the name she'd been given, but it made no difference. She had only one name now. Death. Devourer of worlds. Damn! Kaltain bites back! Kaltain bites back! Damn! Yeah, y'all, I was so confused. I was like, when the fuck did Manon get a fucking collar on her neck? I was so confused. So damn confused. I think we're good enough to... No, I don't like that. Okay, we'll keep it like this. Chapter 55. Aylin fully believed in ghosts. She just didn't think they usually came out during the day. Rowan's hand clamped onto her shoulder right before sunrise. She took one look at his tight face and braced herself. Someone's broken into the warehouse. Rowan was out. Believed in ghosts. Never mind. Rowan was out of the room, armed and fully ready to shed blood before Aylin could grab her own weapons. Gods above, he moved like the wind too. She could still feel his canines at her throat, rasping against her skin, pressing down lightly. On near silent feet she went after him, finding him and Adian standing before the apartment door, blades in hand, their muscled, scarred backs rigid. The windows, they were their best options for escape if it was an ambush. She reached the two males just as Rowan eased open the door to reveal the gloom of the stairwell. Collapsed in a heap, Evangeline was sobbing on the stair landing, her scarred face deathly pale. Oh no. If Lysandra is dead, I'm gonna cry. Am I going to cry right now? Please don't let that bitch be dead. God damn it. Her scarred face deathly pale and those citrine eyes wide with terror as she peered up at Rowan and Adian, hundreds of pounds of lethal muscle and bared teeth. Aylin shoved past them, taking the stairs by twos and threes until she reached the girl. She was clean, not a scratch on her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, her red gold hair catching the light of the candle that Rowan brought down. The staircase shuddered with every step he and Adian took. "Tell me," Aylin panted, silently praying it wasn't as bad as it seemed. "Tell me everything." They took her. They took her. "Who?" Aylin said, brushing back the girl's hair, wondering whether she would panic if she held her. "The King's men." No! Evangeline whispered. "They came with a letter from Arabin. Said it was in Arabin's will that they be told about Lysandra's bloodline." "What?" "That they be told about Lysandra's bloodline." Aylin's heart stopped dead. Worse. Far worse than what she braced for. "They said she was a shapeshifter. They took her, and they were going to take me too, but she fought them, and she made me run, and Clarice wouldn't help." "Where did they take her?" Evangeline sobbed. "I don't know. Lysandra said I was to come here if anything ever happened. She told me to tell you to run." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Rowan knelt down beside them and slid his arms around the girl, scooping her up, his hand so big that it nearly enveloped the entire of her back. Evangeline buried her face in his tattooed chest, and Rowan murmured wordless sounds of comfort. He met Aylin's eyes over the girl's head. "We need to be out of this house in 10 minutes, until we figure out if he betrayed you too." "I don't understand what happened. I thought Arabin's original will was destroyed." "What?" "I don't understand what's going on." As if he'd heard it, Adian edged past them, going to the warehouse window that Evangeline had somehow slipped in through. Lysandra, it seemed, had taught her charge of few things. Aylin scrubbed at her face and braced a hand on Rowan's shoulder as she stood, his skin warm and soft beneath her calloused fingers. "Nesrin's father. We'll ask him to look after her today." Arabin had done this, a final card up his sleeve. He'd known about Lysandra, about their friendship. He didn't like to share his belongings. Why must I relive the pain of that fucking book? Why must I relive the pain of this fucking book all the damn time? I'm done. I don't want to deal with the Assassin's Blade anymore. Kale and Nesrin burst into the warehouse a level below, and Adian was halfway to them before they even realized he was there. They had more news. One of Ren's men had contacted them moments ago. A meeting was to take place tomorrow in Oakwald between the king, Dorian, and the wing leader of his aerial cavalry. With a delivery of one new prisoner headed for Morath. No! No! They can't take her! They can't take her! They can't do this to her! No! "You have to get her out of the tunnels," Aylin said to Kale and Nesrin as she stormed down the stairs. "Right now. You're human. They won't notice you at first. You're the only ones who can go into that darkness." Kale and Nesrin exchanged glances. Aylin stalked up to them. "You have to get her out. Right now." For a heartbeat, she wasn't in the warehouse. For a heartbeat, she was standing in a beautiful bedroom, before a bloody bed and the wrecked bodies splayed upon it. Kale held out his hands. "We're better off spending the time setting up an ambush." The sound of his voice, the scar on his face, was stark in the dim light. Aylin clenched her fingers into a fist, her nails, the nails that had shredded his face, digging in. "They could be feeding on her," she managed to say. Behind her, Evangeline let out a sob. If they made Lysandra endure what Aylin had endured when she fought the Vald Prince. "Please," Aylin said, her voice breaking on the word. Kale noticed then, where her eyes had focused on his face. He paled, his mouth opening. But Nesrin reached for her hand, her slim, tan fingers against Aylin's clammy palms. "We will get her back. We will save her. Together." Kale just held Aylin's gaze, his shoulders squaring as he said, "Never again." She wanted to believe him. What is going on? I'm stressed. I'm stressed. Am I reading 56? I am, right? Yeah? 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 Yes? Okay. Chapter 56. Say less. Say less. A few hours later, seated on the floor of a ramshackle inn on the opposite side of Rifthold, Aelin peered at a map they'd marked with the meeting's location spot, about half a mile from the Temple of Themis. Whatever. The tiny temple was just inside the cover of Oakwald, perched atop a towering slice of rock in the middle of a deep ravine. It was accessible, only via two dangling footbridges attached to either side of the ravine, which had spared it from invading armies over the years. The surrounding forest would likely be empty, and if wyverns were flying in, they would no doubt arrive under cover of darkness the night before. Tonight. Aelin, Rowan, Adian, Nesrin, and Kale sat around the map, sharpening and polishing their blades as they talked over their plan. They'd given Evangeline to Nesrin's father, along with more letters for Terrasin and the Bane, and the baker hadn't asked any questions. He'd only kissed his youngest daughter on the cheek and announced that he and Evangeline would bake special pies for their return, if they returned. What if she has a collar or a ring on? Kale asked from across their little circle. Then she loses a head or a finger, Adian said baldly. Aelin shot him a look. You don't make that call without me. Oh! Not her over here talking. Miss, I'm gonna fucking kill Dorian. And Dorian? Adian asked. Kale was staring at the map as if he would burn a hole through it. Not my call, Aelin said tightly. Kale's eyes flashed to hers. You don't touch him. It was a terrible risk, to bring them all within range of a Valg prince, but we paint ourselves in word marks, Aelin said. All of us, to ward against the prince. In the 10 minutes it had taken them to grab their weapons, clothes, and supplies from the warehouse apartment, she had remembered to get her books on word marks, which now sat on the little table before the sole window in the room. They'd rented 3 for the night, one for Aelin and Rowan, one for Adian, and the other for Kale and Nesrin. The gold coin she'd slapped onto the innkeeper's counter had been enough to pay for at least a month, and his silence. Do we take out the king? Adian said. We don't engage, Rowan replied, until we know for sure we can kill the king and neutralize the prince with minimal risk. Getting Lysandra out of that wagon comes first. Agreed, Aelin said. Adian's gaze settled on Rowan. When do we leave? Aelin wondered at his yielding to the Fey Prince. I don't want those wyverns or witches sniffing us out, Rowan said, the commander bracing for the battlefield. We arrive just before the meeting takes place, long enough to find advantageous spots and to locate their scouts and sentries. The witch's sense of smell is too keen to risk discovery. We move in fast. She couldn't decide whether or not she was relieved. The clock chimed noon. Nesrin rose to her feet. I'll order lunch. Kale got up, stretching. I'll help you bring it up. Indeed, in a place like this, they would get no kitchen to room service. Though in a place like this, Aelin supposed Kale might very well be going to keep an eye on Falik's back. Good. Once they left, Aelin picked up one of Nesrin's blades and began polishing it. A decent dagger, but not great. If they lived past tomorrow, maybe she would buy her a better one as a thank you. Too bad Lorcan's a psychotic bastard, she said. We could use him tomorrow. Roman's mouth tightened. What will he do when he finds out about Adian's heritage? Adian set down the dagger he'd been honing. Will he even care? Halfway through polishing a short sword, Rowan paused. Lorcan might not give a shit, or he might find Adian intriguing, but he would more likely be interested in how Adian's existence can be used against Gavriel. She eyed her cousin, his golden hair now seeming more proof of his ties to Gavriel than to her. Do you want to meet him? Wait. Okay, sorry. Perhaps she'd brought this up only to keep from thinking about tomorrow. A shrug. I'd be curious, but I'm not in any rush. Not unless he's going to drag his cat Cadre over here and help with the fighting. Such a pragmatist. She faced Rowan, who was back at work on the sword. Would they ever be convinced to help, despite what Lorcan said? They had provided aid once, during the attack on Mistward. Unlikely, Rowan said, not looking up from the blade. Unless Maeve decides that sending you don't know what that says, and the next move in whatever game she's playing. Maybe she'll want to ally with you to kill Lorcan for his betrayal, he mused. Some of the Fae who used to dwell here might still be alive and in hiding. Perhaps they could be trained, or already have training. I wouldn't count on it, Adian said. The little folk I've seen and felt in Oakwald. But the Fae, not a whisper of them here. He didn't meet Rowan's eyes, and instead started cleaning Kale's final unsharpened blade. The king wiped them out too thoroughly. I would bet any survivors are stuck in their animal forms. Aylin's body became heavy with a familiar grief. We'll figure all that out later, if they lived long enough to do so. For the rest of the day and well into the evening, Rowan planned their course of action with the same efficiency she'd come to expect and cherish. But it didn't feel comforting now. Not when the danger was so great and everything could change in a matter of minutes. Not when Lysandra might already be beyond saving. You should be sleeping, Rowan said, his deep voice rumbling across the bed and along her skin. The bed's lumpy, Aylin said. I hate cheap inns. His low laugh echoed in the near dark of the room. She'd rigged the door and window to alert them to any intruder, but with the ruckus coming from the seedy tavern downstairs, they would have a hard time hearing anyone in the hall, especially when some of the rooms were rented by the hour. We'll get her back, Aylin. The bed was much smaller than hers, small enough that her shoulder brushed his as she turned over. She found him already facing her, his eyes gleaming in the dark. I can't bury another friend. You won't. If anything ever happened to you, Rowan, don't, he breathed. Don't even say it. We dealt with that enough the other night. He lifted a hand, hesitated, then brushed back a strand of hair that had fallen across her face. His calloused fingers scraped against her cheekbone, then caressed the shell of her ear. It was foolish to even start down this road, when every other man she'd let in had left some wound in one way or another, accidentally or not. Damn. There was nothing soft or tender on his face, only a predator's glittering gaze. When we get back, he said, remind me to prove you wrong about every thought that just went through your head. She lifted a brow. Oh? He gave her a sly smile that made thinking impossible. Exactly what he wanted, to distract her from the horrors of tomorrow. I'll even let you decide how I tell you. With words. His eyes flicked once to her mouth. Or with... Gross. A thrill went through her blood, pulling... Not fair. Not fair at all to tease her like that. This miserable inn is rather loud, she said, daring to slide a hand over his bare pectoral, then up to his shoulder. She marveled at the strength beneath her palm. He shuddered, but his hands remained at her sides, clenched and white-knuckled. It's too bad Adian could still probably hear through the wall. She gently scraped her nails across his collarbone, marking him, claiming him, before leaning in to press her mouth to the hollow of his throat. His skin was so smooth, so invitingly warm. Aylin, he groaned, her toes curled at the roughness in his voice. Too bad, she murmured against his neck. He growled, and she chuckled quietly as she rolled back over and closed her eyes, her breathing easier than it had been moments before. She'd get through tomorrow, regardless of what happened. She wasn't alone, not with him, and not with Adian also beside her. She was smiling when the mattress shifted. Steady footsteps padded toward the dresser, and the sounds of splashing filled the room as Rowan dunked the pitcher of cold. Dunked the pitcher of cold water over himself. Oh, that's funny. Not the old man. Not the cold water. I think that's my favorite thing that he's done this entire series. Oh god, Saturday's gonna be stressful, isn't it? Saturday's gonna be so stressful for me, y'all. What? Oh my god. Woo! Saturday's gonna be a trip. Damn. Yeah, I'm stopping. I'm starving. I'm starving, y'all. I'm sorry. Ugh. I have a feeling it'll be fine, though. Yeah, I feel like it'll be fine. Because there's no fucking way. There's no fucking way that Lysandra dies. Y'all, there's no way that bitch dies. Maybe later on she might die, but right now, hell no, she's not dying. And if she does, well, I'll be crying. Yep, I'll be crying. Caitlin, we just finished. I just read chapter 56. So I'll be reading 57 through, I don't remember, I think like 60. So they're gonna rescue they're gonna rescue Lysandra. I mean, Sam died. You don't have to remind me about that, though. You don't have to remind me. In my mind, he's still alive. In my mind, he's still kicking. He's just lying a little low right now. Why would you? I hate how she brings his death up, or like she like does a lot of like parallels to his death and like the things that he said and all that, and I fucking hate it. I can't have anything. Anyway, whatever. I'll see you guys on Saturday. Has Rowan grown on you? No? Still the same. I'm just tolerating him. Yes, he has grown on me. I like him now. I wouldn't go as far as to say I love him, but I do like him now. He definitely doesn't. I don't want him to not be in the books anymore. Yes, cousin. Oh man. Oh well. Alright, well, I guess I'll see you guys on Saturday for fucking stressful ass chapters, and I'll be sure to pack my Squishmallow this time because I didn't have it for Sam's chapter and I really regretted it. So we'll see if I'll need it. Anyway, love y'all. See y'all on Saturday. Bye.